Hey folks, Longhorn Lester here. I'll tell you what, if you think I sounded bad yesterday, this head cold of mine has me all stopped up. But the good news is, I did bathe last night in my Old Spice body wash, so that should help a little bit. Today we're going to work in the cemetery. You know my Uncle Raleigh passed recently, and it's going to be my job, since I am the official cemetery caretaker, to have everything set up and prepped up and looking pretty for the day that we actually lay him to rest there. You guys come on and join me and Jake as we get a little work done this morning. Come by this and trim, hedge trim along the row of hedge we have planted here, which this is the path, the lane that leads up to the cemetery. We're also going to come by and cut these low-hanging limbs that have stretched out over the top of the lane, and that's going to be our first job. There's my helper right there. All of the babies come out to watch us work, which is funny. I came down with the lawnmower, and there's not a whole lot you can mow right now. I tried to just blow out some of the pine straw that's sitting everywhere. I'm gonna have to get me a rake or have Jake bring the drag. That might be a lot easier. But this is a spot that Uncle Raleigh wants to be buried here. And so we're gonna get the weed eater and just kind of clean everything out, the chainsaw, and we're going to just make it look a little bit nicer, clean all this stuff up and blow everything off. And then of course, here's the lane that I was telling you about. That's the lane that the procession will come down when they bring him in. And then the pastor at the church has offered to let us use their reception hall here for bathrooms and for water and anything else that anyone may need, just a place to sit down and talk. And that's nice. He's left me that key. And then I asked him if he wouldn't mind keeping the kids off of this area until after the services and all, which will be one day this week. So that's what's going on over here. I didn't charge my batteries, folks. I tried to do everything cordless if I can. And lo and behold, if I don't come out with all the equipment, and I'm already got a dead battery, so I'm gonna go replace it. So Jake is cutting all of the big stuff. We're not gonna cut all this back. We like to have the privacy between the church and us here. We're just trying to level it up. You know how I am, spatial reasoning. We want to have it nice and squared and flushed and pretty much of a straight line. So I have the hedge trimmers. We're going to start at the end over here and work our way forward. So y'all can see how it looks now, and hopefully it will not look that way when we're done.
Do what? Yeah.
That is called the wedge cut. You can put a tree down anywhere you want it if you know how to cut it correctly. Did you like that? Jake, you were worried about me. He says, Lester, you're too close. I says, no, I'm not. I'm doing the wedge cut.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Next time you gotta
wedge cut, I'm thinking about a wedgie. Come here, boy.
No.
That right there. There's a lot. That's a lot of work. Now, we're not quite done yet. I still want to mow down through here and clean up some of the pine straw. But wow, isn't that pretty? Isn't that beautiful? It's funny how these littles have not left that side of the fence yet. They are so curious what Daddy's doing over here. Right now, I'm trying to rake up some of the pine straw around my Nanny and Pops' grave. I'm going to try to rework some of this and get some flowers to go here to make this look nice and pretty. It just needs to be blown off and raked out real good. The pine tree loses so much, and then of course a lot of the things that fall out during this fall kind of can litter the ground up. It's actually pretty. I actually think it's a pretty look with all the pine straw, but it makes the ground slippery. Seriously, it makes the ground very slippery. If you've ever walked on pine straw, you know how slippery it is. And we don't want folks coming out to the grave site and then slipping and sliding around. So I'm going to rake it up a little bit and pile it amongst the trees. I'm not going to burn it or anything. And that's where I'm at now. I'm going to tell you a story that my Uncle Raleigh told me. It's a war story. It's very interesting. But in the Vietnam War, Uncle Raleigh, of course, was a Marine. Loved his country. Always loved his country. And they sent him to a part of Vietnam right along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Now, this Ho Chi Minh Trail was a major network where the North Vietnamese, along with the Viet Cong, which were the enemy that the South Vietnamese and the Americans were fighting against. This was a major network where they would bring in their supplies and, resupply with munitions and you name it. And so the Americans could not seem to stop the influx of the Vietnamese and the Viet Cong into the South. So they tried a couple of tactics. Their first tactic was to go by and drop this Agent Orange, I think they called it DDT, to try to kill out some of the vegetation so as they could have better surveillance of where these troops and whatnot were moving. But the Viet Cong were clever. They began to travel by night and they began to operate through a tunnel system. And so then the United States realized that they weren't really able to slow down what these guys were doing and the amount of movement and the resupply. So they chose to go ahead and try a different tactic, which is crazy to me, but they began to fly high into the atmosphere and drop off some kind of ionized particles, which would create rain. That's true, an artificial rain. And so Uncle Raleigh and his, the guys he was there with were just being every day just inundated by rain. And of course the government had hopes that this amount of rain would somehow make it harder to tunnel and also create such swampy conditions that the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong could not travel as easily down the supply routes. Problem is, it made fighting conditions very difficult to where Uncle Raleigh and the guys that he fought alongside would have to literally take off their boots, tie them and wrap them around their neck, roll up their BDUs, and just to walk around the camp. They would go on patrols that way. Now the problem was, if their higher ups ever came in and would fly in for these surprise visits, and they would see these guys out of uniform, and they called that out of uniform, they could be reprimanded. So it was really foolish how the government did all these things and made fighting conditions almost impossible, yet would reprimand you if you on your own would try to find a way to improvise and make your life easier, because everyone knows you can't walk through the sludge and the mud in boots, and it just capes to your boots and makes each step almost impossible. But going around barefoot is quite a bit easier. It just so happened that on one such patrol, dressed in only half uniform, my Uncle Raleigh and the guys who were with him got into a firefight with some Viet Cong. Uncle Raleigh was shot in the leg. And so even despite the fact that Uncle Raleigh's losing blood, they had called in for a medevac, they had to also not undress him, but dress him. How crazy is that? That in the midst of sitting there bleeding out, the guys around you they were aware that when you get taken in and you land, they don't want to see you show up with your jeans, your BDUs rolled up to your knees, your legs caped with mud, and your boots wrapped around your neck. That's a fun story. Uncle Raleigh told that story, and it reminds me of all the things I would do as a school teacher to try to improvise to make my classroom a more conducive, to learning, even though your administrators didn't want you to mess with. They have a set curriculum that you're supposed to follow, and lo and behold, you sway from that. But Uncle Raleigh told that story. I want to spin my camera around and show you what I've done so far. So I began to rake some pine straw up. You're probably wondering why there's not much grass growing here, and that's just because we've planted so many shade trees. Me and my nanny came through here years and years ago when my grandfather first passed, and we planted all these trees. We've made a very beautiful place here. This is our little lane that leads up to the cemetery, and we planted every one of these trees when they were just tiny saplings. Well, they've grown up, y'all. They have all grown up, and now they shade this place so well, especially this live oak, that we can't get grass to grow here. All right, so church has started, so I kind of have to stop working for a little bit. But I spoke to the pastor today, and I told him to please keep the kids off their little play area today. I strung me a piece of barbed wire across there, and to remind them not to pass this area. I don't want them to come over and make a mess of all the things that I cleaned up and raked up. So this is just kind of a view. Now, of course, it goes a lot further back. I trimmed up all the hedge. Jake weed-eated the best he could. We got all the pine straw kind of pushed towards the tree line. We used the mower for that. This looks great. We cut down all the limbs that were hanging over the lane here. And then I'll just do a kind of a walk up the lane here. It looks real pretty. I kind of wish that we had not planted that one pine tree right there in front of the tombstone of my grandparents. It would be really nice. Seriously, I am actually going to consider having that tree taken down, because the lane should lead right up to my grandma and grandpa Morrow's grave. And that tree right there kind of takes away from that. It does. And this has nothing to do with spatial reasoning. This has nothing to do with spatial reasoning. I've done a little bit of raking. I've got the pine straw raked here into some piles. And anyway, I think it's going to look real nice. I may come down with my blower and kind of blow some of this stuff off a little bit. And like I said, put some stuff around here. But for the most part, I think that Raleigh Jerome Morrow, also known as my Uncle Raleigh, will be very happy laying here beside his dad and his mom. Oh yeah, and we can't forget all the littles. Yeah, he'll always be able to hear the screams and hollers of Lester and Ellie and Jake as we hear that bell, hearing Ringo's bell and the squawk of them geese.